Well, hey there, and welcome back to Time to Write. I'm Amy Kelly, and this is my good friend, Emily Roberson. And we are here to talk about today the three F words: fame, fortune, and freedom.
So our topic today is one that I heard on the excellent Creative Penn podcast this morning. Joanna Penn has a great podcast geared towards indie authors, but really useful for any kind of an author. And she was talking about an interview that she had done where the woman that she'd interviewed had said, when you fall into comparison, you can come back to your values. And she said the way to identify your values is to look at the three F's. And those three F's are fame, fortune, freedom, or in any order you choose.
Okay.
And to really ask yourself, like, which of these words is sort of what is driving my author career, my ambitions. And so then when you're in a situation where you're comparing yourself to someone else, to another author and their success, you can ask yourself, well, does it look like, do they have the same value I do? Because if they don't, then that's not even
it's apples to oranges.
Right.
So kind of help me out here. What would you say are the working definitions? I think it's pretty self-evident, but so for fame, that would be like being well known.
Well, I think fame is sort of, and I would love, as people are thinking about this, like to put it in your own framework, because for I mean, fame, of course, we could mean like Brad Pitt, but I also think that like being a author who gets featured in the New York Times book section would count as a kind of fame. One of the things that I really, really love, which is going to talk at author festivals, is a kind of fame.
Right. So recognition, basically,
recognition
for you. But what I love about what you're saying here is when you pick fame, fortune, or freedom, you're going to have some concrete goals, or it's to me like things that you can look at and say, okay, yes, I've achieved this.
Right.
And they're going to be individual to you, right? Like it might be, I'm interviewed on the Today Show or Good Morning America as an author or whatever. So
fresh air. That's mine. Anybody who listens to Terry Gross, that's mine. Please put me on Fresh Air, Terry Gross. I'm a great interview. But for fortune, that would be about maximizing the amount of money. And so a great example of this is there are, and I know some of you guys are going to be like, there are people that have met all three. And yes, there are. But like when you're making your decision-making process, if you kind of identify, like if your value is, I want to make the most amount of money, there are hugely successful indie authors who never hit the New York Times bestseller list. If you sell everything through your own website, you'll never hit a bestseller list, but you'll get that money right into your pocket.
Right.
And so there are some people for whom that is like the key value. And then if freedom is your key value, well, and this is what Joanna Penn talks about on her podcast, because freedom is hers. So for example, she doesn't have any employees of her author business. Like she doesn't want to be responsible for
someone else's paycheck.
She doesn't have like I have. I mean, freedom is enough of a value of mine that has really kept me from ever teaching a class, from like teaching a college class or even trying to do something like that, because I really do like the freedom. That's one of the things I love the most about this job, is the freedom to say, like, I'm going to hang out with my kids this afternoon and I'll do that later. Like I really, really did not like a day job. And a lot of that is because I hated having to be at your desk, even though you knew you could do the work at another time.
Right.
Right. So running through that. And so the big question is that people probably have is, why can't I have all of these things? So Amy, why can't you have all three at once?
Well, I think especially if you are maybe newer, or maybe you're like him and you have one or two novels published or whatever, you really are going to be making different decisions based on which one of those is your value, right? So I mean, I think even the way that you're published is going to be different because if you want fame, then you're really probably going to want to be eligible for awards and different things like that that often can only happen if you have a publisher, right? So
Right.
a lot of indie things are not accepted as entries into
Right.
some of those contests, and your goals are just going to be different. So what you're hitting and the things that you're doing in addition to your writing, as far as like if you want fame, it's going to be like pitching to
Mhm.
different media outlets and that kind of thing. Versus with Fortune, you might be doing things like offering online classes or trying to find speaking gigs or speaking at you know different conferences and things like that. So
Right.
right.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I was talking to an author at I thought this was really interesting for those of us for people that Fortune is one of theirs. I met an author at a literary festival and we were just talking about, he's a person who's written some nonfiction and some fiction. And he was like, speaking is where all the money is. He was like, figure out what's your hook and start pitching. Like he talks to a wide variety of, I mean, things where you wouldn't even necessarily like
make the connection.
make the connection, but
Yeah.
he's done the work of like figuring out what's the pitch, what's the connection. And that in a way that's kind of fame, but he doesn't speak for free. I mean, he's going to all these places because because it pays well.
Well, and I think that's where we're getting into like when you do choose one and stick with it, oftentimes some of the other, the other two will show up, right? But that wasn't your initial goal,
Right.
right?
But I think even when they start to show up, that is maybe when you need this lens even more.
Hmm.
Because, for example, there are some writers, and I know some of us are like, "Oh, this is the dream," right? But this isn't a writer example, but this is a dancer example. I was reading an interview or watching a American Experience about Twyla Tharp, which I
Oh, yeah.
probably have mentioned before in this podcast. It was so
Hmm.
excellent, and she was talking about it. And she's a dancer. For people who don't know, she's a modern dancer. There was a moment of fame for her in the '80s where she got offered so many different things and she took them all and it was too much. And the thing is for her, she realized like, oh no, her big thing is actually about creative control. So really freedom. And
Hmm.
she got in so deep and had borrowed money and all these things. And so her freedom really collapsed. And I think that is, if you have really identified like these are my values, then you have no problem walking away from buckets of money. If freedom is your value, you can totally be like, there are too many strings attached to that money. I am walking
Right.
away from it.
Right. Deadlines and
Right.
responsibilities and all
And
that kind of
other
thing.
people's um this comes up when people sell their books to the movies. Like if your book is optioned for the movies, like you you'll get more money if you just let them do what they want to do
Right.
and you don't have any
Say in it
control over
and
it, say over it.
control.
So
Right. Right. Which that's a value too. What would that fall under? Maybe freedom?
freedom. I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah,
freedom.
for sure. Well, and also, and I think this is for me a lot of what I've chosen. Like my kids are, I would say, one of my high, like at the very top of my priority list. And so being available for them has been super important to me. So I've made decisions that support that. Right.
Right.
And I think that's the other message we have. It doesn't have to stay the same. Like you don't have to, sit on one and choose it and that's it. Like this is
Right.
going to shift and change as your life shifts and change and your season changes. It doesn't all have to be one thing.
One thing. But I really loved it. And this is how Joanna Penn really started talking about it as a tool to pull yourself out of unhealthy comparison. Like
Yeah.
that to me was the really useful piece because you realize, like, oh, because comparison, here's the thing, guys, like we make it sound like comparison is a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's how you role model. It's like literally what a role model is a person where you're saying, oh, that person did that. So that's available to me.
Well, and
Um,
I think that's the kind of people we are choosing to be, Em and I for sure, where we're definitely of the, a rising tide lifts all the boats. And
Right.
that's why, several episodes we've talked about this. One of them has been like finding a critique group. Like, you want to find your people, and there are some people who live in the negative comparison.
Right.
That's not healthy for me. I don't think it's, I think you've
It's
determined the
really
same
bad for
thing.
me.
Yeah, right. And so having some tools to be able to recognize when you're falling into that trap of negative comparison, and flipping it and turning it
Right.
around, or at least being able to discern, okay, well, I can't compare myself to that because their goals are so different than mine are.
Right.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like, if you look at someone, if you notice you're in that unhealthy comparison place, just asking yourself, well, wait, does this person have the same sort of clarifying value that I have? And if you realize, like, oh, no, no. And some of this for me, you guys, I have to say a lot of this has to do with like really looking at my values without a lot of shame attached. Cause all three of these words for me bring up like bucket loads of shame. Like they're like all three of them. Like,
Well,
oh,
and I'm glad you're saying that, because I think that's one thing I really want to reiterate. And this is a conversation that we've had in our critique group a lot. I feel like part of the writer life, it's not just like getting yourself down onto the page, it's wanting to have other people read it. And I think outside of an artistic community, that's really difficult for people to kind of wrap their brains around. And one reaction to that can be kind of a shaming around, I want to be famous, or I want to make a lot of money, or I want to have freedom. Like, there can be some shame from the outside
right,
placed on you that then you internalize. But I think what Em and I are trying to do here is to really normalize the kind of ambition that comes along with writing or other creative
right.
endeavors, right? Like, that it's
Right.
okay. Like, if that's how you're wired, like, lean in.
Right.
Lean.
And the other piece is if you're someone who like I said, I would love to be on Fresh Air. I would love to be on the New York Times bestseller list. I would love that. There are other people that they do not care a whit about that. That is also totally fine. Totally
Yes.
fine. I do not care about having a private island. I don't want one. I don't even want like multiple homes. It seems like a pain in the neck to me. I'd rather just
Yeah.
VRBO. But
Yeah.
some people, like, they really, 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 really do want like, I was laughing with a friend one time because we walked into this beautiful home, but for me, it looked like a museum. Like,
Yeah.
it didn't do anything for me, and my friend was like, "Oh," and I was just like, "That's just different people being different. That doesn't make me better than
Better.
her or
Yeah.
her better than me." And so in the same way, like, if you're listening to it's entirely possible that you're listening to me and Amy and you're like, I don't want to be on the Today Show.
Right.
If Hoda wants to let me wear a hat and talk about books,
Sign me up.
I would say Amy too. If Hoda would let you put on a hat and talk about books
Oh
with
my
you.
gosh, yes. In a millisecond, for
Yeah.
sure. That would be so fun.
So just and I think like for us, we just want to totally normalize. But also if you are a person who really truly down to your soul is like, I want people to read my books, but I want to be a hermit.
Mhm.
That's also totally fine.
Yes, and you just identify it. And I would say too, kind of underneath as the foundation for all of these things that I think we all three things do have in common is the writing, right?
The
Like, that's the
writing.
baseline. Like, you are, like, the bottom line is you are writing to the very best of your ability, and
Abilities.
using all the
Yeah.
tools you have, that is the given here. I feel like
Right.
that needs to be said.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay. So let's run to our big three. What's the mindset we want people to bring to this question of the three F words?
I would say an attitude of curiosity and of just having shame-free discernment. And when we were prepping for this, we talked about really being able to have a mindset of looking at the 30,000 foot view, like pulling out and kind of looking at the overall. picture with
Yeah.
curiosity, right? Okay, and so what's the practical, Em? What would
I
that
think the
be?
practical is just to think about these 3 words. Think about it when you're driving the car, maybe journal about it, like think about it and see. One of them is probably going to ring if you can, and maybe the 3 F's made it easy to remember. Maybe if fame is sticking for you or fortune, if one of them is sticking for you, maybe go to the thesaurus and find a synonym that you are more comfortable with. Like I found
Right.
that like I'm pretty sure that for me some version of like recognition
Yes.
is a being
Yeah,
seen is a
yeah.
value. So so run through that and then just spend a few minutes on it. This is not your marriage vows. This is just a framework that you have. So what's in practical next step people can take?
So I would say whichever word you land on, write it on a post-it note, stick it on your monitor or somewhere that you're going to see it so that it's in your toolbox and you can pull it out whenever you are facing any of that kind of comparison or even when you're facing decisions like how
Choices.
choices like how what's going to guide your choices, as you move forward, right?
Right, with your writing
Yeah.
life. And we bump up against these choices all the time. They could be choices. Here's a good example. Let's say you're sitting down to write. Let's say you love vampires. You love writing about vampires and or a dystopian or whatever the thing is at a given time. And the market has shifted. If your goal is freedom, yeah, just keep writing about the thing that
Hmm.
you love and then you publish it whatever way you want. And maybe other things follow and maybe they don't. Maybe you just have 30 vampire romances that are up there on Kindle Unlimited for people to read and you get the absolute joy of getting paid, $2, $3, $5, whatever, because somebody read your vampire romance and
Hmm.
nobody has to, like, you could write it under a pseudonym. Nobody even has to know. So if that's your goal, but if you're like, oh, no, 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 I want desperately to be traditionally published and written up in, you know, I want to be in the Parade magazine or whatever. Well, then, okay. Can you switch your vampire romance themes to be something that's a little more current?
Current. Yeah.
So just think it doesn't mean you have to like throw everything away, but just like that can be part of like a framework for you.
Right. Right. Love that. So, Em, why don't you start us off with your high low?
My high is still that it's summer. I really am. I mean, okay, so here's the thing. I have realized that if I can just take a deep breath and release that I'm not going to get everything done that I think I'm going to get done in the summer, then you just kind of enjoy the summer and the fact that like everything works a little more slowly and nobody has to be anywhere else at 7:30 in the morning and things like that, which are great. So that's my high. I love summer. And my low, it's just that too. It's just that like I don't get as much done as I think I'm gonna, which is okay.
It is okay. It is okay. Well, it's funny. My high would also be summertime, but for a couple of different reasons. One, I feel like I've had the motivation, I guess, as with ADHD, sometimes that is not handy and accessible, right? So I've had the motivation to kind of organize in my office and in my room and just kind of straighten up some things, which it's always like it gets the positive momentum rolling, if that makes sense. So and it's energizing. And then also just with summertime, we right before the pandemic started, we had built like a little deck off of our backyard and just being able to sit out in the evenings and enjoy that and the weather has been really nice. And in Texas, like there will come a point here in the summer where we're not going to be able to sit outside because
Yeah.
it's just so dang hot. So and it looks out over my husband has a ginormous garden. And so that's just been really fun. And we've been enjoying this. These are our last couple of weeks before we have one of our kiddos home for the summer. So just kind of enjoying our quiet time together. So
Oh,
that
fun.
yeah, so that has been my high. And then I would say my low is with doing all of the straightening and cleaning, like, I really have to fight my shame around that, like, not having a perfectly neat and clean house, those kinds of things, and feeling like I should be fill in the blank, and then just stopping myself and reminding myself this isn't a should situation. It's okay. Like,
It's
it is
okay.
okay. It's okay. So,
I'm so curious about how often for everyone, for listeners, like I would love to hear how much this is true for you with all kinds of things, whether it's writing or cleaning, that the should ends up keeping you from actually doing it. It's like you're
oh, yeah.
so afraid to actually like look at the pile of things that you know you need to go through that you just keep adding to it and make and just in that cycle of
Yeah. Yeah. I had that pile in my room, and it sat there for a long time, and I dreaded it, and it put this knot in my stomach every time I looked at it. And then it took me maybe 15 minutes to clean up. Like,
yeah,
seriously? So it just, yeah, but that starts the positive momentum. Like, oh, wow,
right,
if that only took 15 minutes, then this might only, so
right,
forth and so on. So I'm jumping on the motivation train
right.
while I have it. And while we're talking about it, I wish, like, I take that back. Very happy with who I am, and I trust myself. I have friends who, when they get stressed or when they get happy, when they experience any kind of emotion strongly, they clean. Like, wouldn't that be awesome?
That is not me. That is not me.
Oh, I'm not
But
saying you were the friend. I'm
yeah,
just saying, yeah,
I know, but they do exist. I know they
they
exist.
exist. Not
Yeah,
me.
not me.
Not me.
Nope. I do cook
Okay. Okay.
and bake.
Okay. So see, yeah, this is a tell-all, like a
Yeah.
exclusive episode, because I hate cooking. My husband has
Mm,
started doing the cooking now that the kids are gone. He grills like once or twice a week. We eat, whatever he's prepped. We throw a vegetable or a salad with it. It's lovely.
yeah.
So nice. Yeah. Cooking is
And
one of
I have
those.
realized this is the thing. You start to realize these things. Like I genuinely enjoy the process of now I do not like making food for people that don't want to eat it. That is not fun to me. But the process of like I have thought people have said, Emily, you would have more time if you did all your grocery shopping online. But here's the thing is like I find the process of going through the order form online so much worse than actually just going to the store.
Yeah. Well, and I actually enjoy grocery shopping. Like, that's super fun. And they've opened like a new HEB is like a huge grocery stores chain here in Texas. And so they've opened a couple in our area recently. Love that. Love that. But cooking, like, no lie, I'm not exaggerating at all. Like, I literally have had, over the course of our almost 30-year marriage, probably 6 fires. Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's
Fires?
like flames. Yes. Mhm. And I know, like, looking back now, I'm like, okay, like, ADD, like, and I don't wanna blame everything on that, but it makes sense to me. Like, it's really hard for me to deal with details, which recipes are detailed, and
Right.
then
Recipes are
and
details.
then I'd forget about it, or I do something stupid, like make a casserole. Like, I was so proud of myself. This one time I made an extra casserole and put it in the freezer and pulled it out and put it in the oven for us to eat, and forgot that I had put plastic wrap over it underneath the foil. So we sit down to eat. We're all like starving. Nope. Have to wait a little while for us to be able to go get some food.
Classic. You know,
Classic.
I have found this is one thing, and then we'll actually get into our topic. That if I try, like, I was listening to some podcast about ADHD, and they were like, try doing something without distraction. And because I always like listen to a podcast or something while I'm cooking, I totally mangled the recipe. I was like, oh, this is
Yeah.
interesting. If I'm trying to concentrate on something with my whole brain, like, it doesn't do very well. But I
Mm.
always wonder with the cooking is I started I made a lot of our meals as a kid. So I
Uh,
have been cooking. I remember like a lot of our standards that we eat all the time here in our house, like chili. I can remember browning hamburger and making chili when I was eye level with the pan.
Wow.
So I was like probably 3rd grade. So
Yeah.
so for me, cooking doesn't feel hard because
Yeah.
it just feels like,
Right. Well, you've had success at it. And I feel like part of mine is that negative feedback loop,
right. Yeah. I
But
don't make a
now,
lot of things that I'm not super familiar. Like I tend to make the things where it's funny to realize that you turned into your grandmother, but like I make a lot of things
yeah,
without a recipe. Like if somebody tried to,
right. Well, and for me, I can assemble. Like I'm really great at assembling, like a good salad or whatever. But
yeah,
you know,
it's the,
yeah,
yeah.
love that.
So,
Oh,
okay, we're almost out of time, but Amy Kelly, what are you reading?
oh, what am I reading? It's this book about generations, and
Oh,
it's about like the real like they're looking at statistics and real data on the difference between like baby boomers and the silent generation and Gen X and Gen Z and
huh.
all the millennials and all that kind of stuff, which is totally kind of my jam. Like we talked about before, my previous podcast was in the middle of it about middle schoolers. And so it's just super interesting. So
Yeah.
I'm loving that. And I will also say my husband and I started and finished Ted Lasso. I cannot say enough about that show. Like it is brilliantly written and it's heartwarming. It's just all the things. So
Yes. Which
watch
we
it.
need to, I've been waiting for my husband not to be working quite as much so we can
Yeah.
watch it again.
Jump on it. Yeah.
And for me, well, I just started something that I didn't like, so I don't want to name it because oh, there's our buzzer. Um, I don't want to say it because yeah, there's no reason to do that. So let me think if there's something I can think of that because we always talk about stories save lives.
Yes.
And so I've been thinking a lot about those books that are like the formative books or the books you go back to again and again, or the books that you like that are your like your touchstones or like your studying
Yes.
books.
Your
And
old friends.
your old yeah, right, your old
Your old
friends,
friends.
your buddies,
Yeah.
and or the ones you just return to like, at different points. And I would say I've been thinking a lot lately about how much the Lord of the Rings is still that for me.
I knew
Like
you were going to say that. I knew you were going to
how
say
much I
that.
can still just like dip in, dip out, or watch a little bit of one of the movies, or just think about. And so I just think that is so interesting to think about the life of a book, like, and of course that book is super famous, but for each of us, like there are other books. Like I was thinking about Amy's Betsy Tacy series that she
Oh,
mentioned, which I've, never
yes.
read those. But I remember reading a book in elementary school called Anna to the Infinite Power, which was about a girl who'd been cloned. And it was so good. I still remember things about that book. And so just
Yes.
the ways that like the books that we write can, touch a reader and then have a life, afterwards. I just think that's such a cool thing about what
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah, for sure. This reminds me too. The other book that I'm reading right now is John Green's, and I can't. I have trouble pronouncing
The
the word.
Anthropocene Reviewed.
Yes,
It's so good, you
it is
guys.
so good. It's so good. And I'm on the chapter where he talked about going to the planetarium. Oh, it's so good.
So good.
It's
It's
so
on my
good.
permanent shelf. It's
And you know what? He is an author who does a really great job on social media. Like he and his brother have done lots of YouTube videos that are kind of educational, but if
mhm,
you catch him on, I don't know if I guess it's TikTok or Instagram
YouTube.
Reels or YouTube,
YouTube.
he is just a really great role model for someone who's living with mental illness like anxiety and um,
OCD.
OCD and panic attacks and things like that, and just really open about it and just very inspiring. So,
Did you see that Hank Green has cancer?
no.
Hank Green has cancer.
Oh,
He's been talking about it on TikTok. I'm
that makes me
gutted.
really
I mean,
sad.
I know that's such a weird thing to say about that's the weirdest thing about the internet. Sorry, one more thing is the parasocial relationships where you feel like you know somebody when
Yeah.
um but
Yeah.
that I think that's yeah. Anyway, so
Yeah. Connected.
um
You feel connected,
you
right?
do.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
We have a Patreon.
If you would love to support us that way, we would love that. And thank you so much for hanging out with us. We enjoyed our time together and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Oh, and let us know. Did the 3 F's speak to you? What's your?
Yeah. What's your F? What's your F word? Right. Thanks, guys. Bye. Thanks so much for being with us today.
We love our people and we want to get to know you better.
So email us at questions@timetowritepodcast.com to have your questions considered for the show.
You can also suggest topics by emailing us there.
Also, drop us a review on Apple Podcasts. Not only will it thrill us,
seriously, we read everyone.
It also helps others find the show.
We're driven by sharing stories, and your review helps us do that.
Just remember, your stories matter, and we're rooting for you to find time to write.
Even if it's only 5 minutes. 5 minutes, you can do it.
You can do it.